When buying planners, you've probably considered your purchases in terms of things like, does this planner have the right layouts that I need to use? Do I really like the cover, or is it kind of ugly? Is it the right size for me? And these are all great questions, but I find that when we ask ourselves these questions, we are often asking them in the wrong order, which means then we make purchases that may look nice on the surface, but that don't actually work for us in the long term. That's why in this video, I'm gonna give you a unique framework that you can use to ask yourself the right questions in the right order so that you can narrow down that massive list of planners into what's actually going to work for you.
So the framework we're going to be using is going to be based off of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you've been around the internet for any amount of time, I assume you have seen this. Basically, Maslow's hierarchy of needs stipulates that human beings need the bottom of this pyramid to be handled before they can achieve the top half of this pyramid. So the physiological needs that we have, like food and shelter, must be taken care of before we can do things like self-actualize or achieve our goals, things like that. So all this fun stuff up here, self-actualization and everything, cannot be achieved until our basic needs are met. Similarly, we need to be looking at our basic needs in terms of planners before we can shop for the stuff that's up top. So I've created the planner hierarchy of needs, and this is going to tell us what we need to have solved first before we can get up to the fun stuff like cool creative colors and fancy branding. So in Maslow's hierarchy, Maslow? I think it's Maslow. So in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the first thing we need to handle is physiological needs like food and shelter. In the planner hierarchy of needs, the first thing you need to ask yourself before you make a purchase is, does the planner fit into my budget and does it have a purpose? These two things must be answered. I would also say you can add any other non-negotiables that you particularly have fit with fountain pens. But I really think budget and purpose are the really important items down here, because if you simply can't pay for something, you should not buy it. And if you don't have a really strong purpose for something, you should not buy it. And take this with a grain of salt, right? We might be in this for a planning hobby, but I'm talking specifically here about stuff that you need to function in your productivity. So you want to be realistic here. For example, when we're thinking of budget, how much money do you actually want to spend on a planner? How much money do you have to spend on a planner? If money is no object, then don't worry about it. Spend however much you want on it. But if you have a budget, like a lot of us do, you might write down like, I'm gonna spend no more than $30 on a planner this year. Also be realistic when you think about your purpose. Most people have things like an everyday carry or a work planner, but very few of us have things like a media journal. And so if you think, oh, I want to use the Hobonichi Weeks, or I want to use the Common Planner for a media journal, ask yourself, be realistic and ask yourself, will I really use a media journal? Will I really get use out of this $50 object, $30 object that I'm buying if I've never used a media journal a day in my life? So be realistic and decide on what these basic things are: the budget, the purpose, and any other non-negotiables. Then we can start to climb to structure. So this is probably where you already spend the most of your time when you are thinking about planners anyway, so this should sound really familiar to you. This is stuff that affects the user experience of the planner. And I have this here as second from the bottom because if it doesn't feel good, you are not going to actually use it. So we're thinking things like size, layout, binding, paper. Some of this may be relevant to you, some of it might not be, but in general, I'll just give you a brief overview of all four of these. So size are things like A6, B5, basically how big your planner is. Like the experience of using this planner is way different than the experience of using this planner. So what kind of size do you like to write in? What kind of size do you like to carry? Those kinds of questions come here. We'll also take layout. Do you need a yearly page? Do you need monthly pages? Do you like a weekly layout? If so, what kind of weekly layout? Or do you need those daily pages? You want to think about binding as well. So this is what is considered a bound book, right? But there are also such things as ring planners. And then you want to think about the paper. So for example, my Sterling Ink Common Planner has the really nice Tomoe River paper that is so smooth to write on. Very nice user experience. For me, I really like that, but some people really cannot deal with the thin pages and they need something thicker like in a Leuchtturm or even a Moleskine. I also think paper is important for things like, does it work with your favorite pen? So for everyone, I think these 4 things are going to be in a little bit of a different order. I go back and forth between whether or not size or layout is more important, whether or not paper or size is more important. In general, I think binding is the first thing you should consider. If you're going from a bound book to a ring system, for example, it's going to be so different and so challenging. I think probably after that is size, closely followed by layout, and then paper. But the point is, you want roughly 3 out of these 4 to be familiar. So you want about 3 out of these 4 things to be super familiar to you. So for example, I really enjoy a B6 size. This is the size of my common planner, but I have also used an A5 size before, and I will get by with an A5 size. An A5 size is very familiar to me. So when I'm choosing a planner between a B6 and an A5, what's going to be more important to me in that distinction is like, does it have the paper quality I like? Does it have the layout type that I like, for example? So determining what you like in terms of this structure and user experience might be a little bit different to you, but in general, that's the order I like to use. And then I will often take 1 out of these 4 things to experiment with. That gives me a nice little bit of variety while also making sure that I don't buy a totally different planner that's not going to work for me.
Speaking of productivity tools, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, SetApp. It has completely changed the way I work on my Mac and iPhone. SetApp is like having a productivity superpower. Instead of hunting down productivity apps one at a time, SetApp gives you access to dozens of high-quality tools that you can use to boost your productivity, all for one simple subscription. SetApp has transformed my daily routine. The first thing I do is I open Daily. It's my go-to time tracking app, which helps me pinpoint exactly how much time I spend on all my various projects. Then, when it's time to dive into deep work, I open up Focus. It blocks distracting websites and helps me stay in the zone. And when I need to jot something down that isn't related to my current task, I pull up Side Notes. It's always there on the side of my screen, ready to capture quick thoughts without disrupting my workflow. The best part is that I discovered all of these apps through SetApp's smart recommendation system. No more endlessly searching or downloading apps that don't quite work. SetApp suggests exactly what I need, and they even have these great app guides that show you how to make the most of every tool. And get this, all of these apps and dozens more come in one subscription. No in-app purchases or hidden fees in sight. Since I started using SetApp, I know I can tackle any task that comes my way. So if you want to supercharge your productivity like I have, hit the link in my description box below and use the code RachelInTheory for a 14-day free trial so that you can try all of these amazing apps totally risk-free. Trust me, your future productive self will thank you. Okay, let's get back to talking about planners.
Okay, once you have asked yourself, is it within my budget? Do I have a purpose? Is the user experience roughly what I want it to be? Then we can move up to things like lifestyle. Also, just really quickly to reference back to Maslow's pyramid over here, the structure/user experience item is safety and security. So really think about these things as something that makes you feel safe and secure. Now his lifestyle item is love and belonging, but I put lifestyle here because something we all need to consider is whether or not our planners will work for us. And I'm kind of feeling like this is like actually illegible. So I'm gonna go ahead and write about lifestyle on the sidebar over here with black just so that you can actually see it. But basically this is where you want to consider your system and your life. You can ask yourself, do you have to stretch your current system in order to make this fit? Or is it a natural fit? Does this also fill an actual need? We want to check back with our practicality down here. We might think, oh, the purpose of this planner, I have a really clear idea. I want it to be a media journal. But when we think about our lifestyle, we think, well, I don't actually consume that much media. So why, even though this purpose felt crystal clear to me when I was thinking about the practicality, if I don't even watch a lot of TV or read a lot of books, why do I need a media journal? So think about your life, think about what you actually do all day, and just check back in and make sure that whatever you've fallen in love with in these 2 early stages is actually relevant to your life. I'm going to give you an example of how to evaluate your lifestyle based on these 2 planners again. So say I am looking at this planner, And I love this planner. I think it's great. I've looked at my practicality. It fits within my budget. It's under $30. The purpose is to have an everyday carry, which I definitely need in my system. So practicality, good to go. Structure and user experience. I like the size. A5 has worked for me in the past. It's not my absolute favorite size, but it will work for me again because it has worked for me in the past. It has all the layouts I want. Really, I care about this weekly layout, and it has a really nice weekly layout. The binding is nice. I prefer a bound book to a ring system, so the binding fits with my needs. And then lastly, the paper quality. This will definitely work with my favorite pen because I prefer a ballpoint pen. So this is gonna work just fine. So I'm considering buying this, but I know that my lifestyle involves me being on the go a lot, and I need to use my planner a lot when I am moving around or traveling. So buying a very big planner may not fit with my lifestyle, even though it checks off all of the previous bullet points down here. I like the user experience. I like the practicality of it. It fits within my budget. I have a strong purpose. Getting a big old planner when I'm on the go all the time and I have a small bag is really not something that fits within my lifestyle. So this is going to be something that you want to check in on sort of after you've done these two items, because these two items can sometimes lead us to thinking we will use a planner that actually doesn't fit within our life. Okay, now we get into the fun stuff, which is personality. This is things like brand, aesthetic, customization, covers. This is what I see a lot of people jump to first because they might have a brand that they really trust, and because people often think personality and all of this customization with covers and aesthetic is actually the same thing as user experience, but it's not. This is what we call in the tech world user interface, or UI, not UX. So the design of something can impact your experience of using it, but ultimately at the end of the day, the structure that you need to make sure is in your life are things like layout, size, binding, these practical things down here at the bottom. This personality stuff is great to layer on top, but this is just the design. These are the covers you're putting over it. These are the aesthetic of the planner. These are the customizations available to you with this planner. So once you make it through determining if it's right for your budget, if you have a strong purpose for it, if all of the items underneath user experience, the size, layout, binding, and paper, at least most of that is to your liking, and you've figured out that it will in fact work for you in your lifestyle, then you can get to things like personality, aesthetic, customization, etc. Of course, this can impact your enjoyment and desire to use the planner, but ultimately, if you have layouts that work for you and a strong purpose, and it fits right into your lifestyle and system, this is all just gravy on top. Now that we've handled everything down here, we can finally get to the top of the pyramid, which is what I'm calling freedom. Maslow's original top of the pyramid is self-actualization, which stands for things like morality, creating meaning, accepting things that are difficult in your life, experiencing creativity, stuff like that. And there's not a perfect one-to-one for this hierarchy of needs in terms of planner purchases because, and this might be crazy to say, but no planner is going to bring you self-actualization. It is just not that deep. So instead, up here, I've written freedom as a stand-in for the general feeling that you get when you are using a planner that really works for you. Some might call this planner peace. Some may say planner peace doesn't ever truly exist. And I think that's because this real feeling of freedom and planner peace is so hard to get to because it requires because it requires a level of acceptance that no planner will be perfect. Freedom and planner peace is of course the goal of doing all of this, of buying planners in the first place. But I think it's very hard to achieve like perfect planner peace. I think it involves a lot of expectation setting and willingness to make mistakes and change, and that can sometimes be hard to get and also hard to foresee when you're making these planner purchases based on things lower in the pyramid. But at the end of the day, whatever you buy, just try to accept that no planner is going to be perfect. You are not going to be perfect. And the most important thing is the choices you are making bring you a sense of freedom and a sense of peace in terms of how you are planning your life. We don't want planning to take over our lives. We want to plan in order to live our lives. So keeping this in mind as the end goal, we want to start back at the beginning and ask ourselves, number one, does it fit with our budget? Do we have a purpose? Number two, is the size, layout, binding, and paper to my liking? And which one of these is the most important? Which one of these am I willing to experiment on? And then we want to ask, will it work for us in our our lifestyle and in the system we are using. Then we can get to things like personality, the brand, the aesthetic, the customization, how it looks in our bag. And finally, with all of these questions answered, we can consider letting go of any perfectionism, accepting that nothing's going to be perfect, and buying the best possible option anyway.
The reason I really like this framework is because knowing what order to consider your planner needs in is so important, and it helps you narrow down your list into what's actually going to be realistic and work for your life. If you liked this video, you might like my video from last year on how to choose a planner. It has a ton of good information in it, so I'll leave that right here on the screen next to my head. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, for being here, for being subscribed, for being awesome. I love you guys so much, and honestly, I love planner season. It is the best time of the year for us on YouTube, so I hope you guys are watching a lot of good content, and go ahead and leave your planners for 2025 down in the comments below. Let me know what you're buying and if this guide was helpful. Otherwise, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.